Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Stanford Institute of Philanthropy, Developing an Impactful Story for Generational Giving webinar. My name is Lena Rodriguez, and I'm the Endowed Director of the Stanford Institute of Philanthropy. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about what we do here at the Stanford Institute of Philanthropy. We are passionate about creating a learning environment to share best practices with fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. We want to thank Benny Stanford for his vision in creating the Stanford Institute of Philanthropy. We currently have 11 sites across the country, from Northern California to Florida, and you can see on this map where we're located. So we invite you to join us for any of our webinars, seminars, trainings, and workshops. Our classes have empowered nearly 27 nonprofit leaders, and that's on ground and online. What we're most proud about is the fact that 99% of our participants feel engaged and energized by our instructors. We invite you today to tweet along, so please use the hashtag #SIPWebinar. And if you have any questions, please submit a question at any time using the Q&A section. And of course, if you'd like to ask a question anonymously, just check the box that says send anonymously. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you to tell us specifically what you would like to learn today. That way we can customize the presentation. So I ask that you put your questions in the comment chat box now. Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to introduce now my good friend, CEO and General Manager of KPBS, Tom Carlo. We asked Tom to join us today because he shares in the Institute's philosophy that everyone in an organization is a fundraiser. In fact, he refers to himself as the Development Officer-in-Chief. I'd like to brag a little bit about my friend. He just recently received the Public Broadcasting Development Professional of the Year Award. And a little caveat to that, this award is given to development professionals. And as I mentioned earlier, Tom is the CEO and General Manager of KPBS. So he truly embodies what we say a fundraiser should be. A little more about Tom is that he's raised $255 million in the last 8 years, which places his public broadcasting station among the seventh largest in terms of fundraising. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend, CEO and General Manager of KPBS, Tom Carlo.
Well, thank you very much, Lena, for that very nice introduction, and I'm very thrilled to be here and to share with all of you my best practices that we've been able to have here in San Diego. And but before I really get into the specifics, I want to talk just a touch about us as an organization here. We are in San Diego. We are the public media station, and we have under me both the television side with PBS programming and the radio side with NPR programming. And we were an organization that went through a lot of challenges and difficulties in the early 2000s. It was such a dramatic change in terms of digital content starting to take audiences away from traditional television, traditional radio, and even in the print media in newspapers. And we had some challenging times from 2001 through 2008. And we had layoffs as an organization, and we were struggling to really make an impact in our community. And I was, at that time, I was an associate general manager, and our general manager retired at the end of 2008. And I threw my hat in the ring to become the head of our organization here. But I knew I couldn't continue to do the same old, same old. I had to create a new business model for our organization. And I looked at our strength as an organization. And if you're familiar with public broadcasting around the communities that you all live and serve in, the NPR station has been growing in terms of our news and the reception of our news to our audiences. And that was our strength here in San Diego. And I decided that there was a void in serious local journalism that was complementing the work that came from NPR and PBS, and that in our community, our newspaper was downsizing dramatically in San Diego. The commercial television news and the commercial radio news in our marketplace was getting very sensational or soft, or in some cases, only doing talk on one side of the political aisle or the other side of the political aisle. So I decided we were going to go after local serious news and journalism, and we were going to put it on all platforms. And that meant the radio content that we were known for was going to go to television and the digital and the social media. And so we launched that in early 2009. But the other side of it is we don't sell tickets, or we don't sell a gate for people to come in. People have to, on their own, support our organization through membership or corporate support or philanthropy. And the only way that people will write us a check is we got to go out and get it. We have to prove to the audience that we're worthy of their support, and we have to prove to the consumers of our product that they value us. And unless we go out and frame our message, they're never going to send us any money. And so that became my role in terms of setting up the direction of our organization to go after serious local journalism on all platforms, and that I would play, along with my development team, a strong role of engagement in this community and engaging people. And so moving along, I really was looking at the cause-selling relationship of our donors. And what you see on your screen on the left side and the right side is 4 phases of fundraising and relationship building. I think that today are still very important. It's your approach, it's your identifying needs, it's making the presentation, and the resistance and gaining of commitment, or closing the deal. And the section on the left is really kind of a traditional model of asking. You met with somebody right off the bat, and you tried to really get to the close, and then spent a lot of time on the close. And I believe that that whole model has changed dramatically, because there is such a competitive landscape out there of fundraising. There are so many NGOs that are out there competing for the dollar, and development arms of different NGOs are becoming extremely sophisticated. CEOs are playing an important role, and organizations are trying to create an organization that is valued and needed in their community. So the competitive landscape of fundraising has changed, and you have to create a case for support. And the model on the right, I think, is the one that's really now the one that at least I embrace, and the Stanford Institute of Philanthropy has been encouraging people to look at this model. You really need to spend almost all of your time, I believe, in the building of trust and the building of rapport and getting to know who your donors are, and then, identifying the needs or asking the questions, listening to them. And if you look at the very end, the close and the making of the ask is very much a small part of it. In fact, I was just trying to realize I hardly have ever actually made the ask at the very end, because people at one time will say, we're very interested in helping. We really believe in what you're doing. We really believe that, you're the right person to lead your organization. It's all about relationship building. And a lot of times at the end, the people are asking you for the proposal, or they're saying, well, how can we help your organization? And so I really believe that a lot of the model that's on the right-hand side is really the way to go. And there is a phase or a cycle that can be used in selling to your donor, and I think it's on your screen now. And this is something that we look at very, very much is really an 8-step cycle of prospecting, your pre-approach, your approach, your need for discovery, and I'll get to number 5 in just a second. But I want to make a point that whether you're a one-person shop or have a full, massive staff of development people, these steps are really, I think, very, very critical. I think once you've established your business and your case for support, prospecting is something that is very, very important. Who are your constituents? Who are the people that value your service? Who are the people that have benefited? And that leads into the pre-approach, approach, the need for discovery. And I'm really going to focus a lot of my time here on the presentation and the storytelling, because what I have found is when you're out in the community, no matter what your nonprofit organization is and who you're attracting, the relationship that you build and how you approach in storytelling the different generations of the older generation, the matures, or the baby boomers, or the Generation X, or the Millennials, or the Generation Y, is really, really something that I think is extremely important, and it all, I think, really focuses on engagement. You need to engage in a personal relationship with as many people you can, and the presentation of storytelling is very critical, and I'm going to get into that in just a moment or two. But one of the key things you have to do is really develop your prospecting and your pre-approach, and that's done with digging into the data of finding and developing profiles of your potential donors. You need to gather information about the prospects and how it would affect their decisions to donate to you. And this involves name, age, gender, contact information, who are they working for, what's their education, how much do they have, if you can even find out, you know, what kind of property they have, who are the nonprofit organizations they support, what networks are they a part of, even their family and their kids, and what clubs are they involved with? Are they involved on different boards? All of those things will really help you in terms of figuring out who these people are and having a profile of them. You might even be able to research down and find, you know, as I said, the real estate, what they hold, and their stocks. And so anything you find out is going to help you with the donor before you even get to know them. And once you get to know them, I've always said, always know their names. Be able to call them by their first name and ask them questions about themselves and their family. How is their son doing in college? Or how is the grandchild? I understand you had a new grandchild. Do you have any pictures of it? That goes back to that touch point of the people that you're dealing with and how you're going to approach it. And then it really gets into the generational giving, because the generational giving is very, very important. As I said, there is a huge competitive landscape out there for the philanthropic donor, and how you approach people at different ages and knowing their traits, their beliefs, you know, how how do they use your service, or what do they care about, is going to be so fine. You have to define your target donor. Just like your organization has probably a strategic plan that you're defining your target audience, you need to find out your target donor. Different generations or donors tend to be driven by varying motivations and giving preferences, and understanding their giving differences will really help you in crafting the communication to those particular donors. And if you can better understand the interests and habits of each generation, you're going to really be able to be more successful in fundraising. And the other thing that's coming up is what we call micro generations. Within a generation, you're finding that there's micro generations, and I'll talk just a little bit about that. And before I move on, I want to just talk about me and my generation. I'm a baby boomer. I'm 64 years old, and I'm born in 1952. So the baby boomers is a generation that goes from 1946 to 1964. But I feel the generation from about 1950 to 1954 is actually a tweener generation of the baby boomers, because we weren't part of Vietnam. We were a little too young. And the latter generation that was born in the late 50s and early 60s was a completely different one, that Vietnam was a total difference to them, and all of the protesting that took place in the 60s. So to me, the baby boomers actually has three generations, and I know we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. One more thing before we go into the generations is, I want to say that in this day and age, when you're dealing with people, you need to be sensitive of politics. Politics can work against you because the country is so divided right now, and you need to be sensitive of politics when you're talking about issues or your organization. So what I like to do now is move into what I call some traits and examples of different generations. We're going to start with the matures, and or as also has been called the greatest generation. And to me, there's some things that you should look at on the screen. They represent 26% of all giving. This volunteer at 24%. This generation volunteers a lot. 11% of them donate to human rights causes. That's an important thing for you to know. 60% donate to spiritual causes, and 51% volunteer in spiritual causes. And here are the types of things that they support: emergency relief, troops and veterans, the arts, advocacy, and election and campaigns. Now, to go further into this generation, this is an interesting generation, because this is a generation that came out of the Depression and they came out of World War II. And both the Depression and World War II, we won. We beat the Depression and we won World War II. And as they moved into the 1950s and started having kids, which is the baby boomer generation, everything they did worked because the country was successful. And their values are really tied to America and the country. As I like to say, they wear their red, white, and blue on their sleeve. And they know that America is great. In fact, I feel in this political time, don't say we're going to make America great again, because they think America is great. It just needs some tweaking. Now, and this is also a group that I think is one of the last groups in philanthropy that is giving the unrestricted gift. They wanted to give a gift to an organization because it's the good of the organization, and it's good for the community, it's good for the location they live, and it's the best for the country. And they're going to allow you to make the best decisions you have. So they are the group that I think also is one that will just give to give. They gave to endowments. They gave to the organization. So the presentation that you need to make to these people really weaves in a presentation of what your organization or NGO is doing that is continuing to be the best thing for the community, the best for the community as a whole, and best for our country, what you are doing. And I also feel that in generational giving, when you go visit this generation, you ought to look at how you dress and how the colors you wear. I tend to make sure I'm looking a little clean cut, and I wear a full suit, and I wear a red, white, and blue tie. And if I take my colleagues, my development people, the ladies, they'll tend to wear the same thing. We might even put an American flag pin on our lapels or our jackets or whatever, because this is the type of thing people in this generation go for. And one of the things that I did, and I want to weave this example throughout, is the fact that I attempted and was successful in taking our public radio news that we were doing on our NPR station locally, and I launched a TV newscast to take that news and put it on television. And so we are one of the few public television stations in the entire country that actually does a full-fledged nightly newscast. But I had to raise money for it. So in my presentation to this generation, I really was focusing on message points that journalism was struggling, and this is still the best thing for our country. Our country needs to have a well-informed and highly educated populace to make informed decisions. Without people understanding the issues, we're not going to be able to make good decisions when people go to vote. And so these kinds of examples work really well. And you've got to make sure that you tend to play into the fact that this generation is a little more politically red than politically blue. And I think it's important to know that in what your organization may have, if in fact that could play into it. So let's move on to the baby boomers. And the baby boomers, this is a generation that I'm a part of, born from 1946 to 1964. Remember, we were growing up in the 50s with our greatest generation, the matures, in the 1950s, with a car in every garage, a chicken in every pot, and the explosion and growth of the middle class, and everything was perfect, like Leave It to Beaver on TV in those days and the other shows. Here are some interesting points about this generation. 43% of the boomers represent total giving, so that's a big chunk right now. 25% are volunteering. 49% want to know about nonprofits' finances before they donate. They support first responders organizations. 8% donate to human rights. 48% and both donate to their spiritual causes, and they volunteer for those spiritual causes. So this is an interesting generation that's totally different from the matures, because this is the idealistic generation. This is the generation that came out with these great slogans of, we're going to keep America beautiful. We're going to save the whales out in the ocean tops. We're going to be the greatest in what we do. And they were very idealistic in what they're doing, but they were also a generation that totally rebelled from their parents, who lived by whatever the country said they were going to do. This was the generation that fought against the Vietnam War, anti-war protests, anti-establishment, pro-women's rights, pro-civil rights. They focused on issues. They pushed back against the government, and they questioned and they challenged the establishment. And so this is a generation now that is now not into unrestricted gifts to our types of organizations. They have a cause in their mind now, 40, 50 years later. They may be strongly wanting to improve the health care in our community, or get more people to visit museums and have more culture and symphony, or they want to improve education, or improve the environment, or really help with political issues, and so they're tying themselves to issues that are in fact causes they believe in. So when you're dealing with the baby boomers, it's really important for you to know exactly what is your business that you're in, whether you're in arts and culture, museums, healthcare, social services, whatever you're into, is know what you're doing and see, as you get to know some of these baby boomers, do they align with something you're doing? And then you tailor your message to, in fact, that particular cause. And an example for us is as a news organization, we have different reporters that cover a certain beat. They cover health, they cover education, the environment, military, arts and culture, and different other politics, investigative reporting. So when we're meeting and in that beginning phase of getting to know the donor and getting to prospect them and trying to listen to their causes and looking back at our profile of our donors, that what are the organizations they're supporting, if I see someone that's very into educating young people, I ask them if they would like to give a gift to be restricted to our education reporting. Or do they want to give a gift for something that aligns with their beliefs? If they're into, and each of these baby boomers now, I think 20, 30, 40 years later from the 60s, are aligning themselves with a belief and a cause, just like they did in the 60s when they were saying, we're going to improve civil rights, we're going to improve women's rights, we're going to be anti-war. They're hanging their hats on different things, but they want to be restricted. They're not into endowments. And I think that is a key thing. So when I was meeting with some of my baby boomers to get them to support our news initiative on television, I was using things like, news has really changed dramatically in the commercial world. If it bleeds, it leads. If it's crime, it's fine. We're there with serious journalism because we want to be the best journalism in town. We want to have the best and the best impact, and we're going to make our community really, really highly educated. And that gets back to being idealistic and crafting my message to be more idealistic in what we're going to accomplish versus what we did with the matures. Let's move on a little bit to the Generation X. And
Tom,
yes,
Tom,
go ahead, Lena.
We have a question from the audience relative to the baby boomers, and the question is, how has your Facebook strategy changed as it relates to baby boomers?
That is a real interesting question. I actually have an example of that in a little bit, but I will tell you that we now produce our news stories. So they go to television, they go to on demand, they go to radio, and they go to podcasts, and they go to the digital and social media side, which is where Facebook is. We were, for a while, just taking a news piece that was on TV and just putting it on Facebook. But we realized that a lot of people have a different viewing happen. They want shorter clips. A lot of times they're watching it on their phones, so we need to have bigger text. A lot of times they're not listening to audio, so the narration has to be more in terms of text information. And that baby boomers are, in fact, coming on to the sites and things. So that is that. And then we have created a membership Facebook group for our donors that we do engagement opportunities. So we're moving a lot in that direction. And I believe you got to figure out how to. I have another example too in a bit on an organization that was struggling with contacting their younger audience and how they changed with it. So let's go on to Generation X. This is the generation born from 1965 to 1976. Again, here are some key points you can see the Gen X represents 20% of giving, about half of what the baby boomers are. 29% do volunteering work, $40 trillion they will inherit over in a few years. 9% donate to human rights causes. You can see the religious giving and volunteer rate, and the types of things they support: health services, animal rights and welfare, and environmental protection. This is a generation, and my kids are in this generation, that I really think has been in great conflict with the baby boomers. I believe the baby boomers have really kind of labeled these people in a wrong way. They've labeled them as they're not dedicated, they're kind of lazy, they're not, we're not getting along with them, and they don't do things. But it's totally a wrong assessment of this thing. As the matures, we're a generation that won everything. They beat the Depression, they beat World War II, and they were building they built the middle class up. This is a generation that I think everything has failed for them. Government has failed for them. Wall Street and the economy has failed. Big business, military has failed. Organized religion has failed, and even the family has failed. So in a way, everything that the Generation X has grown up with has failed, and they've lost confidence in a lot of things that the matures and the baby boomers have done, and they've lost trust. And so when you're dealing with the Generation X, and when you look at it that way, in a way you can't argue with that thought process. So they are very cautious, and you have to build their trust. So they need to be explained what you're going to do. And I've been using my news on TV as an example. As I said, the matures, I said this is the best thing for the country, to have a highly educated thing. With the baby boomers, I used the message that, we're going to be the best journalism organization in town, and we're going to really, make a huge difference in everything. This is a generation, when I've talked to them about fundraising, I'd have to say to them, look at the state. I have to set the facts up, why I'm doing this. Look at the state of journalism. Television news on the commercial dial has gotten a little sensational and soft. Radio journalism has decided to go to talk and go to one side of the aisle or the other. And newspapers are getting very thin, and there's a lot of fake news out there. So this is something that we're going to put out there because nobody else is doing our kind of news. Fact-based, objective, high-quality, non-sensational, unbiased journalism. And if we can provide that for the people. So what I'm doing is I'm phrasing my message, and I hope you would think about that for your organizations. How do you phrase your message to give Generation X the facts? How is what you're going to do going to make an impact? And you can say, no one else is going to do what we are doing. Generation X wants to be able to look you in the eye and trust you. And we have one donor. He's a major donor, and he's in Generation X. And when we sat down with him and told him what we were going to do, he said, "Oh my God, this is what we need in our community. How can I help?" He goes, "How can I help? I want to also help without giving money. I not only want to give money, I want to give myself. Can I host events? Can I have salon events? What can I do?" And so this is something that if you can build trust with Generation X, they will want to be a very big part of it, but they have to be factual. I have an interesting story that involves my wife and my daughter now is 40. My wife is very much involved with the environment and arts and cultural organizations. She's now retired, but she's involved in many things. And she is constantly walking around our neighborhood, picking up trash and litter and recycling cans when we are out on our walk. So she's on a walk one morning with our daughter, and my wife starts to pick up something, and my daughter goes, "Mom, what are you doing?" And she says, "I'm keeping America beautiful." And my daughter says, "No, you're not. You're picking up the trash in front of your house and our neighbor's house to make our neighborhood a little cleaner." And that, to me, defines the example of, there is no way in hell my wife is going to make America beautiful. But our daughter had put it down to a factual point that you are doing a good job, you're cleaning up the houses around your house. And so that is kind of, my thing with that. Moving on to the millennials, millennials born in 1977 to 1995, they're coming very active in the workforce. They're really aligned a lot more with the baby boomers. I believe they have a better chance of being the future philanthropists of it. They like long-term relationships. They want to get to know you now, and I think they want to continue that relationship, and they want to be involved with many things. We use the expression, if we can get them in at $5 a month in our organization, we can move them up the giving ladder over a generation or so. There are some reasons why these people are not getting involved, or they say that. They say, well, we're too young, we just got out of college, we have no money, we're too busy getting our family and our careers going, and we're going to help down the line. Again, I want you to look at the screen and see a lot of these traits. It's up here so you can make a note of them. 11% of giving, again, it's half of Generation X's time, but I think the potential is really good. But almost 22% are volunteering, and I think that's a really powerful statement in this group. So maybe get them to help volunteer in your organization. They represent a quarter of the population. 18% donate to human rights causes. The spiritual and religious causes drop a little bit. 80% of millennial employees donated to a nonprofit in 2014, which I think is really good. And their supports, they like child development, victims of crime and abuse, and human rights issues. This is a generation that needs to be very much involved in social media. They are what I call digital natives. They started to grow up with digital technology. And I think you need to incorporate digital options for them, whether it's things like Kickstarter or mobile giving options. Look back at President Obama when he was really able to capture text giving at that point. And for us, it's really developed strongly with our thinking, in that we now have hired a social media strategist and a digital fundraising producer to help us in how to prepare our content for the digital platforms and how to prepare fundraising opportunities so we can do a better job with that. I wanted to mention there's an organization in San Diego, and I'm not going to mention their name, but they provide social services to people that have addiction problems or an abusive relationships, or having mental issues and trying to deal with all that. And I was talking to their CEO, and he said, I'm really having a very hard time to get people to commit to their appointments. And I said, well, how are you reaching them? And he goes, well, we're sending them letters and phone calls and emails. And right then and there, I said, you ought to start using social media. You should maybe, be texting to them, having a Facebook place where, they go. You need to have that information of your organization that is designed for the age group and the generation that you're going for. And I believe that that is a very important part. I'd mentioned the part about how I dress when I go see a mature. I tend to try to dress a little differently for the different generations. Tonight I'm going to a wine tasting that our organization is doing. I'm not going to wear a suit, and I'm not going to wear red, white, and blue tie. I'm going to wear jeans and a collared shirt and a sports coat, and I'm not going to tuck my shirt in, because we're having a lot more younger people. And I think how you present yourself is very important. The other thing is I have a variety of development people who are different age groups, and they tend to go to the different age groups, and then we help to make them. I want the younger ones to deal with the younger people, and us older ones to go there. You know, I think you have to remember that the millennials are really the future philanthropists, and they want to be engaged. They want to be in networks, and they want to be socializing. And then we have the Generation Z, which is a generation that I think is a very new. It's coming into the workforce. They're 21 at the beginning stages. We need to learn a lot more about them. They're just graduating from college, but they're already showing signs of philanthropy activities and giving. And at a young age, they seem to be very interested in what's happening in politics. They have only seen, as they've grown up as teenagers, a very divided country. And this is another group that's going to need to be, you're going to have to appeal to them through digital. They were born with a cell phone and a tablet in their hand. And the best way you can connect with them with your product, I think, is a very, very important way, because it'll help you with how you approach them with your donations. I saw there was a question. I don't know. Do you want me to answer it now, Lena, or should I continue? Or it looks like there's a lot of questions. Let me go on to. Let me go on real quick, and then we can open up for questions. We have what I call the micro generations. An example would be the Zennials. This is a group that's kind of between 1977 and 1983. It's the original Star Wars, when Star Wars was released. They experienced the analog childhood, but a digital adult, and they possess both Gen X cynicism and millennial optimism and drive. You know, to me, I think this is just an example. As I was saying, I think there's a micro generation in the baby boomers, and I think we're going to start to see it, because life and technology and the economy and what we do is changing so fast that I believe the generations lasting 20 years in the future will have to be cut down quite a bit. You know, this is also, as they engage too in this, and some of the Generation Z people, these are groups that aren't using Facebook as much anymore, because where their parents are. So anyway, I want to go to the engaging in different generations and donors.
Tom, this is Lena. So
sure.
I wanted to, before you move on, we have two questions that came in during your presentation, and one was by Rachel, who wanted to know if, besides the matching age levels between the fundraiser and the donor, do you find that race and gender plays a role in the discussions?
You know, I think it may still play a little bit with the matures, but I believe in the baby boomers and the generation Gen X. I think that they're more receptive to different generations and different diversity. And I believe, at least in San Diego where we are, is we have a diverse development team in terms of ethnicity and culture. And I'm a little careful with it with the matures, but I'm not with the other generations. But I know for myself, I need to be able to prepare myself to work, to be more, to be trusted by the younger generations.
Thank you. And we have one other one. As a public broadcasting station, how do you cultivate the Generation Zs? So do you do anything because of your youth programming?
We have a trouble with that. We tend to have the kids as the young audience as they're watching the children's programming. In high school, a lot of them watch the public broadcasting programs. In classrooms, Nova is probably the most viewed science documentary in schools, in high schools. We are gaining a huge younger audience in that Gen Z and the millennials on radio because of our conversion to our content in podcasts and promoting it on podcasts. And so, in fact, us as an organization, we are releasing 4 brand new local series this year, and none of them are being released on traditional TV and radio. They're being released as podcast programs. And so for us, I like to always say, I'm not in the TV or the radio business. I'm a media organization, and we have to prepare our content so people will be able to consume it. So anyway, engaging different donors. I think this is so important. We threw these up here because these are like a variety of ways that you can engage your donors. But the biggest thing we do is we engage by creating touch point events. We did over 70 events this past year with our donors, ranging from experiences of coming to our organization, going on a tour, going to arts and cultural organizations or good organizations that are providing social services. We do them in different times and regions. The mature audience doesn't like to go out at night, so we tend to do more luncheon events for them. We use all of these types of things to reach different generations. Mobile optimization is a key. Peer-to-peer fundraising is a key. And this is just an example of that. You have to have a very diverse plan of attack of how you deliver your product and how you fundraise over it. I'm never going to get Generation Z and millennials to watch my 5 o'clock newscast on TV. And I'm never going to get the mature audience to access all the digital and social media platforms. And that's why it's so important that we put our product on all of those different platforms, and we prepare them in those ways, and we prepare our fundraising in those ways. But I would say at the bottom, personal meetings and tours, any way you can get in front of somebody and shake their hand and say hello to them and ask them how they're doing and ask them about how we're doing, and what can we do better. And the people that will offer you the more opinions are the ones that are really invested in you. I want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to just go to one more slide about, and I think I've touched on it, but it deals with, we had one story, and it's on the upper left. It was a TV newscast about a bunch of ladies in their 80s and 90s who marched down their convalescent hospital hallway on the Women's March earlier this year. It was really an exciting thing that they did. And we did it as a TV news piece. The lower left, we did it as a radio piece. But on the far right, we did a Facebook re-editing of it to reach the Facebook audience. So I want to show you the audience size for television and radio. And TV audience averaged 17,000. The radio, that stands for average quarter hour, was 12,000. But I want to show you what the impact was on social media. And we had 44,000 views on Facebook of that one video, 1,300 views on YouTube, and the web story grew 5,000 pages. So anyway, in closing, I want to say that the biggest thing that I did is I set up the vision and direction of my organization, and then I'm out fundraising. I think the role of the CEO is the face of the organization. We are the ones that will that really are guided by our development teams. But at the end of the day, development is about relationships, and people give to people. And if you know the people you're asking, and you know their generation traits and ideals and how they feel about things, and they get to know you and they trust you and they believe in you, I think you're going to be very, very successful in this competitive landscape of all of us going after the philanthropic dollar. So I think at this point we could open it up for more questions.
Wonderful. We have a very active audience, Tom, so thank you for your presentation. We have lots of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and start with one that was sent to us about engaging different generations of donors when you were talking about the various examples of the ways in which you do that. Do you often just ask your donors what type of communication mode they prefer?
Oh, yes, that's a very good question. We have many different ways that we can communicate with them. Some aren't into computers and they want a phone call or a written, a mailed invitation. Some want it communicated through email or Facebook or a variety of ways. So yes, I think that is a very important way to communicate. And then the younger ones want to be involved in a group. I mean, we have a membership, what we call Producers Club group. And a lot of them even want, so anyway, yes, the answer is yes.
Wonderful, thank you. We have more questions. One is, with so many donors, how do you manage your time to give the impression of the personal touch?
Well, my wife and I have been married for over 40 years, and we're empty nesters, and we're literally out every night. I would say we average 5 nights a week. My team here creates a calendar of events and touch points and dinners, and we spend I'm literally out all the time in the community. We also get involved with other like-minded organizations and become sponsors, so we can go. So we're involved with different museums and theaters and nonprofit organizations and good organizations that we develop media partnerships with. So we trade. We don't exchange money for tickets for promotional opportunities on each of our sites and things, because it gives us a chance to touch some of our donors who may be involved with other donors. We have a very wealthy donor who's very much involved with the Alzheimer's project. My wife and I attended the Alzheimer's Gala last week, and I can't believe how touched she was that we showed up to that event. And that's worth its weight in gold as we go forward. My time is, I'm at work every day, and if I'm not out fundraising, no one's going to bring in the money.
Well, speaking of fundraising and dollars, we have a question from Patricia Clark, and she wanted to know, do most of your dollars come from, I'm sorry, that's not Patricia, it's Patrick Clark. Do most of your dollars come from lots of small donations or a few very large ones?
It's a mixture of both. We have about 60,000 donors, and of those donors, 1,700 provide us with $1,200 a year or more, and they total about 2.5 million. The rest of the donors total about 8 million. So it really is a pyramid, and we look very much at the moves management of how we can move them up the ladder. And even if it was a small amount of donors, I would still look at it the same way. You need all of the the $50 donations a year, because you don't know at some point will they become 100 or 200 or 1,000 or a planned gift or an estate gift. So we treat as many of them as we can. Obviously, I don't take all of the $5 a month ones to dinner, but it's very important. You have to have a strong base to build the pyramid up to finding the big philanthropists of the future.
Thank you. And before we let you go, we want you to answer a couple more questions, 2 more. We have a question that just came in, and Rachel would like to know, can you give examples of how you empower your staff to all be fundraisers?
Well, for us, one of the ways that I do it is I say every one of you is an ambassador of this organization. When you're in your personal life, when you're out in the community, and you have to be representing the organization really 7/24, and that involves your own. For us, we encourage people with your own social media to be very careful of your political alliances and what you say. And so that's very important. The other side of it is we have our news team and our development team. And I told the news team that they are in the fundraising business, and they all looked at me like, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, it's because it's your product that in fact is what sells people. We just go out to remind people that they can support the product you put out there. So we try to say that we're all in the fundraising business, every one of us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that philosophy. With that, I just want to thank you again for sharing your time and talent and wisdom with us, and hope that you'll join us again. And I want to thank our audience for being such an active audience. And with that, thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.